everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am Bond, and I am here as always with my cohort, Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Brendan Bond, I am doing really good. Had a day up in Erie, and
Ooh.
that means because I was over on the west side, was able to
Mm-hmm.
stop by. There is a Mexican bakery. It's
Oh.
been around a couple years now. I'm right smitten with it.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard of this. Where is it? So it's up in Erie, you said?
This is up in Erie. This is off 26th Street, and this is
Okay,
a plug
yeah.
for them. We'll say. If I would plug it more if I could remember the name, it's Casa something but that's
Yeah.
terrible that I can't remember. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you are in Erie and you are on 26 heading west past Old Zuck Road before
Mm-hmm.
you get to McDowell High School on the left-hand side, heading in a westward Ohio-bound direction, on the left-hand side there is a Mexican bakery. They do brunches, breakfasts, and lunches, and really good stuff. I was very happy with it. So I'm always happy with it. I've only been there 3 times now, but it's always worth the
Well,
trek.
that
So
makes
I'm
it.
happy about that.
Yeah, no, that makes it. Anytime you go to a place for a third time, I feel that's like, okay, now I'm starting to establish this as a part of a routine, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They have a really wonderful cinnamon tea, and I had that with a little late breakfast for me of seasoned potatoes with chorizo, egg, carrot,
Ooh.
and beans, and it's really nice.
Jeez, you make me
And
hungry.
I'll
Okay.
tell you what. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what though. And now I should because I drove by your house on the
Mm-hmm.
way back, well, past your street. I should bring you some next time. But I was hungry because I got a bit of a purview. We are recording this on the eve of a pretty sizable snowstorm that everybody's talking about. And I believe it's supposed to affect 26 states, which in my memory makes this about the most consequential size-wise since the blizzard of 93, as far as just the sheer volume of the United States and Canada that this is bound to affect.
At least all at once. Like you have like nor'easters and other stuff that comes up that probably hits a lot of those states, but not a lot of the southern ones.
Yeah, it is really remarkable. So, it's been, and we talked about this last time we were together, and we had the week off because I was at the Pennsylvania Farm Show all last week, which is
Yeah.
quite a thing. I know you've had some stuff going on in between, so we're finally sitting back down together. But I know when we were together last time, we just spoke about this winter, that being 2026. It has just been kind of a one extreme to the other, where we've gone from an evening where it's like 60 degrees at night
Yep.
to just this big storm we're staring down.
At the very least, it's nice to have something to concentrate on that's just a normal natural occurrence. I feel like it used to be we would get storms like this all the time, but definitely not in the last few years at least. So,
Yeah, I think the most consequential snowstorm we had would have been back in 2010, where it was
hmm.
what they called Snowmageddon. I know I've referenced that before.
Right.
I think that was probably the closest thing in this area that I can think of that would have been comparable in any way, shape, or
Hmm.
form. So,
Yeah, we
but
will see what happens.
on that, yeah. So on Monday, I had the day off, so I went to do some accordion business and meet with a friend, and I was over at Half Price Books. And anytime I'm at Half Price Books, which they are not everywhere, but we are fortunate to have a couple in the greater
Hmm.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania region. I always go to local history, and I picked up a couple books. Like a Pennsylvania True Crime, another ghost collection, and I picked this up. And when I did, I'm going to plug the book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm intrigued. I thought it was a history book of sorts. Um,
Okay.
But it is not. I believe now it's a fiction, but the book is called The Ghost Orchard, and I'll read a little bit of the synopsis because that's about as far as I've gotten, but I am excited to get to it.
Hmm.
Victor Falkenberg is a student of history and folklore at Pennsylvania's secluded Bodden Hill University. While archiving the letters of a deceased professor, Victor discovers the location of the Ghost Orchard, an enclave of an obscure religious sect whose members disappeared over 2 centuries ago.
Ooh.
There is more to the synopsis, but I briefly glanced over that and I didn't read it as fiction when I was at the
Yeah.
store. So I brought it home thinking, oh, this will be an interesting history I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Well,
I'm going to check it out and see if
yeah,
it's any
again,
good.
for Pennsylvania, especially the idea of old, religious sects and stuff like that, we're in a pretty good spot for that. So I can understand why someone would pick that up, read it initially, and be like, oh,
Yeah,
this
I mean,
is this
no,
is local history. Yeah.
yeah, and that was definitely the way that the book was shelved. So fool me, half price books.
Right.
I spent $3 on the book, so but it is The Ghost Orchard by Gregory Lyons. I don't know if this was originally published December 2011, and right below the publication date, it even states that this is a work of fiction. Would I have not bought it? No, I would have still bought it.
Still
So
about it.
yeah, just a kind of an interesting book that came across. Now, sports betting has never been easier, and its explosive rise has resulted in record bets and outlets for wagers. There are several services out there now which enable people to take the game into other aspects of life. Now, we are able to bet on how long a presidential speech will be, like a bunch of complete degenerates whose self-destructive habit would be shamed in the civil society. Maybe you've seen your own friends excitedly gambling their non-discretionary income, further enriching the shadowy figures behind the curtain who are almost certainly using these windfall profits for totally moral and philanthropic pursuits. Has the impersonal act of using your phone to deplete your bank account made you feel left out and ostracized by your friends who are occasionally stopping by for gas money because they're chasing a win and just need to make it until Friday? Thankfully, the kind folks at Pig Potentates have devised an innovative new solution. Bookies. Bookies are like your phone, but they are in your community and more than happy to assist you in parting with your money. They also offer incentives, exciting incentives, if you are not able to pony it up by this time next week, and you can trust Bookies because they're certified by the same company that brought you Rachmaninoff Roulette, the game whose AI technologies brought the late romantic composer back to life so that he can live forever in our social media hellscape, spinning a stupid wheel ludicrously titled a skill game. Download the Pig Poke Potentate app to identify bookies near you and be sure to use our exclusive code. Perhaps we don't need to financialize every aspect of existence to receive the gift of guilt that we deserve. I'm going to hand things over to you. What's going on tonight?
Okay, so a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and we were talking about how important language is when talking about the paranormal and folklore and all the stuff that we do. And through that conversation, I kind of got the idea. I was like, you know what? We should really do a series of episodes that where we concentrate on defining a lot of the words that we use for these different kind of areas of the paranormal, because there's a lot of things that we probably mention because we live in our own little bubbles, like everyone does to an extent. We probably use a lot of words that are kind of in the lexicon of the paranormal, that if you're not someone who is reading as much stuff as we are on these subjects, or has been into it as long or anything like that, you might not either A, be familiar with the words, or B, have thought much about what they actually mean and what they actually stand for.
Man, I'll say this.
Yeah.
You had clearly put a lot of thought into it. And there were two thoughts I had. One right out of the gate. I always hated essays and papers in school where people would go, what is primordial man? According to Webster's dictionary, and like give you a dictionary. That always seemed very cheap to me. If you were
Right.
going to do that, at least find a way to artfully wedge that
Hmm.
definition in. But I was briefly looking over some of the things that and before I even got there, I was just thinking, well, if I were to find just like what is a ghost?
It's
that would be a lot more challenging. It just generated
Yeah,
a lot more thought
yeah,
because I got into going like, well, it's a deceased person, and I'm like, but we've talked about like ghost dogs. Well, if there's ghost dogs, are there ghost squirrels? Well, certainly there must be ghost squirrels. Why would this only be people and dogs? And then boats. They're ghost ships, but
ships.
is that
Yeah,
just a ship adrift, or it's like the Flying Dutchman that it
hmm
comes back every,
very
or
different
some
things.
U-boat book I had read, and then I
Hmm
thought, well, what causes ghosts? And we've talked about different causes, and one of the ones that I feel has died away is that ghosts have to complete some tasks. It's not something I've heard in the
hmm
popular culture for a while. And I thought, well, if a squirrel dies and it hasn't like gathered all its nuts, certainly, how do I know whether I'm seeing a ghost squirrel or not? And that sounds like a
Right.
really ridiculous thought because it is. It's totally ridiculous. But, we people that believe in ghosts accept that ghosts mostly are deceased people. Even
hmm
people that don't believe, if you ask them to define a ghost, they would say a deceased person. But then it's really any living thing, except it's not. Because
Except
we
it's
never
not.
talk about ghost ferrets. We accept some animals get
Well, yeah,
ghosted and people do. So
yeah. No,
it had a lot, just it generated a lot of thinking.
right off the bat, yeah. And that's kind of where I found myself. So I'm like, oh, this will be a fun episode to put together. And I started really listing things out, and I realized two things right off the bat. One, this is almost a impossible task in the sense that like a lot of the things we're going to try and cover, you could do entire series of episodes on, not just mentioning, how we're defining something. So this what we're going to get into is not meant to be either expansive, or B, terribly in depth. I really wanted this episode to be like, we're just going to tell you the things we're talking about and explain what they are if this is your first time listening to a paranormal podcast. And because I really do think that, education is part of this. And I think that whenever you try and lean in and define some of these things, like you mentioned, to get to the essence of some of it is really tough. It's not as easy as we would like to think. So,
Well, and would you say that some of that is, and you can tell me what you think, there's a lot when you're trying to define something that it becomes a series of appeasements to different people's
right.
thoughts.
Well, not people's thoughts, but just
And it
different
seems like you talked
scenarios.
about reality being kind of, well, you talked about reality kind of being a general consensus.
It's an
And I think
agreement.
too that when you're trying to define something, if you're trying to get the most robust definition, you're kind of doing the same thing. So in a way, we can look at language as being a way of piecemealing reality
Yes.
because there's all these different terms and ideas, abstract and concrete things that I think about. There's that whole concept of the Platonic table. Like, what is
Yes.
the
Yes.
table that is the most archetypical table? And that's an endless argument.
Yeah, it turns into an exercise really quick. So like we say all that to say that like I want people to reach out and explain where we're wrong here, what we're not covering, because there's so much you could do with some of these things. I kind of have this originally broken down. Like what this episode is going to be on is just our paranormal dictionary series, just ghosts, and some of the ideas around ghosts. I also am slowly working on ones for UFOs, Bigfoot, and high strangeness in general. So let's just go ahead and just dive in at this point. So,
Okay, great. So what are you going to like? Here's a word
yes.
and boom.
So, yeah, I'm just going to kind of go down my list and we're going to argue about these, and it's going to be fun.
Great.
So,
I love it.
I figured like the highest order of any of these things that we're talking about when it comes to ghosts, like specifically, the highest order I have listed as the word entity. And I have defined entity as just any non corporeal consciousness.
I think this is definitely where it's a very lexicographical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try again. It's very much in the lexicon of spiritualism and spooky stuff, paranormal stuff,
Yeah.
because you say entity. And
Yes.
I just think any body, be it a
Right. Yeah.
corporate body or a singular animal body, that's
No,
the entity.
that's a good point. Yeah. So like maybe the word shouldn't be entity, but non-living entity or something like that.
Well, no, no, no. I think if we're talking, if we are in this setting, and this
Hmm.
is where you talked about definitions like we being
Yeah.
setting dependent,
Hmm.
we are talking again, we are speaking in this setting, we are utilizing the lexicon of the paranormal.
Hmm.
And that, in that way, entity is thought of as a non-corporeal thing.
Yes. So that's kind
So
of where. Yeah.
it's this is like cleave. Cleave can mean to cut in half or to put together,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah.
situation matters.
Yes. Context. Yeah. Context does matter. So that was like, but that was the biggest bucket I could think of where everything went into entity. So maybe we should define an entity as any corporeal or just any consciousness, even corporeal or
Mm.
non-corporeal.
Boy, I was really going to say yes, consciousness, but then as we begin slicing the pizza up,
Well,
we
yeah,
will come into the
yes,
idea of
a
like whether a
residual,
ghost or not.
yeah, is conscious.
Exactly,
Yeah, that's
residual, the
yeah,
stone tape thing,
yeah. See,
which,
that's why I put consciousness in there for entity. And when we get to the idea of residual, it's almost its own thing. It's almost not a ghost, which people can yell at me later
I
for.
fear this is going to get to the point where we agree that this is a stagging issue that we're really not going to be able to define anything. Any
No,
word
that's
it
yeah.
can't be
This is
defined.
absolutely a to use another fun word. This is an absolutely quixotic goal that we have.
Yes,
Um,
from the Cervantes there.
Yeah, so the next thing we have is just like you mentioned earlier, the idea of a spirit or ghost. I put them together because I tried separating them and I got upset. So I just put them back together again. Um, so
Cleave them, yes.
I define spirit or ghost as, hear me out, the earthbound soul of a human or a soul returning to Earth for some conscious purpose, including visual representations of people from the past, which can be conscious or unaware of their temporal relationship to the experiencer, which is different than entity, like we talked about earlier. Any phenomena which has the impression on the experiencer or the physical environment of a human who appears to be present but cannot be under the commonly accepted laws of physics.
All right, I accept that
My,
definition
my
in its
best one.
entirety, excluding, well,
Mhm.
rather with further clarification
Yeah, please.
specific to the phrase earthbound. What do you mean by earthbound? What is
The
that?
idea of an earthbound soul. So I think the idea of an earthbound soul is it covers because again, we're like you said, we're trying to piece all these things together. I think the idea of an earthbound soul covers the idea that some ghosts or spirits could be souls of previously alive humans who, for some reason, have not passed on to either an afterlife or heaven or whatever you want to call it, whatever the next higher plane, any
Okay,
of those different lexicons, yeah, or
so let's
pantheons, I
go
guess.
with plain as so
Hmm.
the statement you had made about returning to Earth or something like that
Hmm.
shortly after
Yeah.
um would okay, so you're saying some sort of afterlife, some sort of other plane, some sort of other
Yeah.
dimension.
Yes.
I can, again, not being a believer in those things per
Right.
se, I can still accept that definition. I think that's a pretty robust definition.
Right. And that's why I had
Yes.
that second part there of any phenomena which has the impression on the experiencer or the physical environment of a human who appears to be present but can't be, basically. Um,
Right.
yeah. So I think that covers a lot of spirit and ghost right there.
Well, and it's a really good job too in defining that. So congratulations, because again, you're not making a value judgment on whether or not this is a real thing or not, because
No,
it is real literatively.
to the
And in
experiencer.
order to understand these conversations, you have
Hmm.
to, again, have a, this is a pretty good idea of explaining what it is that's being talked about. Again,
Right.
regardless of whether you believe this is a real, this entity, this ghost thing is a real happening or not.
Hmm. So the next phrase, this is one that I had like again like a few definitions of, but had to really pare it back. So just the idea of either haunted, like a haunted as in present tense verb, or a haunting, or present tense, adverb versus
Hmm.
a haunting. So for a haunted or a haunting, a location, person, or object with a history of phenomena associated with it.
Say that again.
A location, person, or object with a history of phenomena associated with it.
Okay, the problem is history of phenomena. I think you need to give examples of, I think it needs of specific paranormal phenomena
We have a
in
whole section on that.
order to,
Yeah.
okay, so then there's like an asterisk C
Yes.
phenomena.
C column, B4. Yeah. Um,
Okay,
and
okay.
then we have our first major like I guess first major change here is going into the different types of things that can be haunted or hauntings. So I first have the split between intelligent haunting and residual haunting, because anyone who listens to this show, or really any ghosty thing, hears the term intelligent haunting or residual haunting. So for intelligent, I just said simply phenomena which is attributed to a spirit which is aware of the experiencer.
Okay. I think this is again where consciousness could come into play, into
Mm-hmm.
the definition.
Right. No,
Intentionality could come in.
intentionality. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, intention, because it usually seems to be aware of, like, there has to be two people to have an intelligent haunting. I feel like
Right.
there has to be the experiencer and the supposed consciousness.
The person,
I think
the
that's a good
person
call.
that is being acted upon, and
Yes, yes.
yes, yes, yes.
And then for residual haunting, I put kind of the opposite phenomena in which a spirit or imprint of a spirit does not seem to take notice of the experiencer. Can appear as this can appear as a representation of the stone tape theory or a playing of events back. I said usually this is associated with either residual PK activity or traumatic or extremes of emotion.
Okay, two things. One, define PK activity real quick.
So so psychokinetic activity is again in our phenomena. So psychokinetic activity is just the idea that
Okay.
consciousness can work on the world around you.
Okay, the other thing I had, the other thing that I was going to mention that I have issue with in this one
Hmm.
is you say a spirit or an imprint of a spirit, and I will reject the phrase imprint of a spirit
Okay.
because what is a residual haunting? We've already said it is ghost. We've already
Hmm.
agreed to that. But its only distinction from other types of ghosts is it has no consciousness that we are aware of,
Hmm.
or it may have consciousness as we think of it, but it has no intentionality. It is just a tape being played and replayed over and over
Right.
again. I don't think imprint, because I think we could define any ghost as being an imprint of an entity. God, I don't like using that
You
word like
could,
that, but
but no, I know what
I
you mean
just
though.
because
Yeah.
again, I say an imprint is a ghost is just an imprint is a part of a person, but then I go back to ghost dog, blah 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 blah. With the spirit,
Right.
with the ghost of a human being, a ghost is an impression left
Hmm.
because we can agree most ghosts do not have mass, do they?
Right. Well, they don't seem to. Correct. Yeah, mostly.
Right.
Um, and that's
They're
where it gets into
passing
some of.
through walls and all that
Mhm.
jazz.
And that's where some of our other things come from, because when we get to like footsteps later as a type of phenomena, how can something not have mass but also
Hmm.
cause footsteps? Um,
Well, that's a good question. But if something doesn't have mass, if something can pass through, if it's not physical in that way, how can it produce sounds from its voice?
right, exactly.
How
Yeah, no,
can its
it's
chords vibrate?
yeah.
And that has
Are there
nothing to do with
chords actually
footsteps.
vibrating? Yes. Like, are there
So, or you're right. Are these sounds coming through something? So
something
this is
else?
getting to a good argument, but again, I reject the. I think to put or an impression of a spirit. I don't like that. I think it's just good enough to say it's a spirit that doesn't have agency. It
Doesn't make
is
see yeah,
just on
not
replay.
having agency is a good way of putting it. Yeah. So getting to on the other side, or kind of staying on the other side of the spectrum, poltergeist activity, which
Okay.
is a whole thing. Poltergeist activity, because again, because of popular culture, it often is attributed to you know uh, people acting on the world around them unconsciously. Other times, people refer to poltergeists as spirits. I mean, the name noisy ghost, in German. It's also it's so it's a type of phenomena, but it's also a type of entity in some cases. It kind of depends on who you talk to. So I defined poltergeist activity as phenomena not directly attributed to a spirit, but also may be attributed to PK energy of a living person. Like I think it has to be both. I don't know if we can say it's one or the other, but I'm open to arguments. Because I feel like it gets used like
I'm
from a folkloric sense, it's often referred to as like an
yeah.
again an entity. But I think when you look at how a lot of paranormal research has gone over the years, like actual lab research and stuff in some of these institutions, it's often again lumped into PK energy from a living person. So I don't know. It's a hard one to define.
Right. And the first times the first I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna make a decisive movement here in
Please.
saying that the first times I ever heard and ever read about poltergeist activity, it was specifically regarding um, energy, telekinetic energy.
Hmm.
These are the claims. This is not what I believe. These are the
Right.
claims. These are stories. And it was usually because of emotional uh, energy from an adolescent, right?
That's one of the big tropes with it.
Somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Those were the early stories that I saw. As you say, the polter is actually like a rumbling, like a thunder, polter
Mm.
in German. So it's like a rumble spirit, which that suggests that sort of energy too. I think that if the word comes from German, I am curious about what German stories of this sort of thing are like, and if they are culturally distinct from ours.
From
I
ours.
don't
That's a
think
great
that
question.
this has anything to do with ghosts. Yeah, well, and I think like we talked about like ghosts in China
Hmm.
apparently can only move in straight lines, and that's influenced some traditional architecture.
Hmm.
I don't know how accurate
I
those
got that.
statements are, but
I
that
got
is
that
some things
book.
I've read.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, we'll have to talk. We'll have to come
We'll have to
back to
look at
that some
that.
other time.
No,
But
that's a really great train of thought, though. I like that.
okay.
Uh,
So my executive action here, as I said, I will be decisive, is to say it has nothing to do with supposedly deceased people. It has everything to do poltergeist activity
so
with living people. The reason I say this is
yeah.
because if it is just a ghost, it has agency. This is
Hmm.
just like there are some people that are really cool to hang out with, and there are some people like you don't want to have anything to do with. This is just a ghost that's throwing stuff off the walls and anything. It's still just a ghost. He's just a ghost that you don't have anything to do with.
Right.
Why put a separate title? He's just an ornery person. We don't have to have a whole phylum for that.
And I wonder too if this kind of goes with how we talk about hauntings. I wonder if people say you have a poltergeist in your house, like you say you have a virus in your body, kind of thing, where it is separate, but it's not as separate as you might think. So yeah,
Okay.
so there's a lot with that. So two of the other kind of
So
big ones.
I reject the ghost aspect of that. I don't think it has anything to do.
Oh, we're gonna do some research. I like that. Yeah, that's gonna
Firm
be fun.
hand.
Yeah. So two of the other terms that get thrown around a lot that I wanted to just kind of touch on that I feel like I was able to distill. Two words that we use a lot, or one word that we use a lot is that we talk about tricksters a lot, and that's been more and more common as something people talk about. I'd say over the last, I'd say 10 years. I'd say really ever since, certainly since Hellier, but even before that with The Trickster and the Paranormal, that book. There's been a few books written over the last few years, but so for Trickster, I put that as the archetypal category where a non-human intelligence seems to interact with people for no apparent reason. I think this covers some of the weirder high strangeness stuff that we talk about, but I think that the trickster archetype also has a lot to do with maybe some of like the mischievous ghosts or mischievous, even some like fae activity, just things that are someone, some kind of non-human intelligence messing with people.
I don't like you using the phrase seemingly no reason.
I don't love it either, but I
I
can't
think
figure
the
out what
whole
it's
reason is
for.
the tricks are
Oh, maybe. No, that's no. Okay, that's a good way of
amusement.
putting it. Yeah, maybe amusement is a better. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Instead of saying for no apparent reason, I completely agree with you. It should be for the entity's amusement. Yeah.
Yeah, it's apparent
Okay.
amusement. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the same side of that scale, we have people talk about things being demonic a lot. So a demon, when we say demon, we are typically referring to the malevolent, non-human source of phenomena. What do you think about that?
A malevolent non-what phenomenon?
Malevolent, non-human intelligent source of phenomena.
Um, I I would accept that, but I think you need to. Demons tend to be malicious. That's
Yeah.
the
So
impression I get of them,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I don't like saying non-human because again, what about my ghost squirrel? That's not a demon.
Well, but I don't. Yeah. No, you're right. Your ghost squirrel is not a demon, but that's what I'm saying. Well, if you had a malevolent squirrel, it would just be a mean ghost squirrel in that case.
Right.
Like
This comes into like
I don't know if squirrels have a pantheon where they have have a non-human equivalent. Maybe they do.
I think they call them red squirrels because those suckers
Yeah.
are always ready to scrap.
They're always, they're
Have
always
you
down for
ever seen a
something.
red squirrel not fighting another squirrel?
That's like literally their favorite thing to do. Yeah. They're just always
Apparently.
ready. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem here is you need to first define what demon is to you, and
Yeah. I mean, like for me,
then
that's what it
expand
is.
it to here.
Yeah. No, again, for me, I think just personally, if I refer to a demon, I'm speaking of a malevolent, non-human intelligence. Like it is a bad thing that was never human in the first place.
Okay. It was never human in the first place, but it's very human-like.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I think we have to get into that this definitely has the idea of demon definitely has a theological background.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, no, that is a good point. I think when people use it a lot for phenomena or the source of phenomena, yeah, I think there are a lot of times where it does have religious connotations. Other times I think that like it is borrowing from religion, even if it's not sourced in it, if
I
that makes
think
sense.
my personal belief is that
Yeah.
it always has
Hmm.
theological connotation
That's
because
fair.
that is the well from which it is sprung. And we can say, well, ghosts have a theological connotation too, and they do
Hmm.
to the extent that it is an attempt to explain what happens to us after we die. What are
Hmm.
some of the potential avenues we could find ourselves going down?
That's a good point.
However, there are definitely beliefs about demons. They have been cobbled together through hundreds of generations of folk practice
Hmm.
and have been adopted into religion. I don't know of a non-religious demon story
That's true.
because
Yeah.
they
No,
all start with a
no, and I
precluding. Yeah,
yeah, and I think that to your point there, I would say that the opposite of a demon is an angel, which also always has a religious connotation. So
right. Do you
I
have
think that's a good
angels
point.
without?
Right. I mean, maybe some people do, but I'd say generally speaking. Again, these are all generalities. So,
Right.
So yeah, so getting now into like a few different like types of ghosts that I wanted to bring up that we talk about relatively often on here, or just in you hear a lot talked about in general with the paranormal. So one is shadow person. Shadow people is a type of phenomena that how I define it was it is something that exists in 3D and it is blacker than black. That is how I separate shadow person from just a shadow. What do you think about that?
I reject blacker than black. I think coming into it just being it is a if you were to ask me to define it on the spot, I would
Hmm.
say it is a folkloric character
Hmm.
that is a sentient shadow and tends to be darker than other shadows and can appear without any light source.
Hmm. Appear with that
You,
case, yeah, so
you
separate
know,
from a light,
it's not
separate from
dependent
a
on
light.
the light.
Not, I like that term. Not
Right.
dependent on the
It is
light.
not a it's not a shadow cast, it is a sentient shadow.
Not cast. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, no, I like that. That's a really good distinction to make. I like
No,
that.
thank you.
So another big one is what we always refer to as the Super Bowl of ghosts, which is a full body apparition. We say full body apparition as compared because there are lots of stories of partial apparitions. So full body apparition is basically when you think you see a person. It is a head to toe person. Oftentimes there is a translucent or not quite real element to it, but there are plenty of stories, just as many, if not more, where it looks like a normal person. Like you wouldn't be able to tell the difference
Right.
sometimes. So
Yeah, and that latter is the most interesting to me. These seem to take place mostly at historic sites
yeah,
because tell me the place where you've heard the story like, oh, it's really interesting that you have reenactors in full period garb.
yeah,
We
it's
don't have reenactors in full period garb. Like
yeah,
that is a trope at this
yeah.
day and age. But I will forever remember the very first time I encountered that sort of story. It was in the very popular Ghosts of Gettysburg series,
Mm-hmm.
and I was there. I want to say I was 10 or 11 years old when I was there, and I read that one book, and it was an account of a reenactor in period regalia
Mm-hmm.
on, I think it was Little Round Top, and he was greeted by a person, um, and he was
Oh.
really taken with the authenticity of the guy's
Mm-hmm.
kit. You know, his whole getup
Yeah.
was very accurate, and he even gave him some munitions and yeah it was and the guy's like this we're not supposed to have live ammunition or anything like this and he's looking at it and he doesn't see the guy leave or something like that. This is all based on recollections, something I read 30 years ago, so bear with me. But at the end he concludes like, oh my gosh, that guy was a ghost, and he I think he claimed to still have the
Like the
paper
cartridge.
and wax
Yeah.
packed cartridge that he was given. That
Yeah.
is that you talk about Super Bowl.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that full body operations take a there's a lot to go into it because like again that's one of those like that story right there, Nick, is one where some people might say that is a ghost. Other people might completely remove that from ghosts and say that's simply just not simply, but that is a time slip in some way, shape, or
Time
form.
slip or dimensional sort of thing.
Some dimensional temporal thing, exactly. Um, So along with that, we use the term doppelganger a lot. This one was hard to kind of pin down too because it gets used in so many different scenarios. So because it either could be a trickster or demonic element, or it could not be. So how I define it as either a spirit projecting itself, either a spirit I really should say entity there. Either an entity projecting itself as a currently living person to the experiencer, or an apparent time/dimensional slip where an experiencer sees or interacts with a person who either doesn't experience that themselves or at all. Because we have doppelganger stories where someone uh, interacts with someone and that person does experience it, but at a different time, or interacts with someone and that person never did that. They didn't come home to get their keys or get something or anything like that. So there's a lot of
Well,
different things you cover in doppelganger.
yeah, and it's funny that you said the word time because the word itself, I think people think it comes German. I think it's actually a Scandinavian
I
word,
believe it is. Yeah.
doppelganger.
Yeah.
Although doppel is also German for double, and
Hmm.
um, and I know like I think in Swedish or Norwegian it is as well, but the ganger is it translates into some Scandinavian languages as time. So double
Oh,
time or double
oh,
take
interesting. Yeah.
sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that checks
That's
out.
my understanding. I don't know more than I think I've said I can get by in Dutch a little bit
Hmm.
because it's so similar to German.
It's
Dutch
close.
is really like it is kind of the best parts of German and English. It's a very
Hmm.
interesting language in that way, in that it's kind of simplified a little bit. But other than a bit of that, a bit of being able to make my way in that, I don't know Scandinavian languages enough. Um, but yeah, that is an interesting thing. I've always interpreted this. What is the difference between a trickster and a demon? Because I think a trickster is just like a type of demon, a type of imp sort of thing.
I guess
They
it could
kind of
be. I
cut from the same cloth.
think that that's why a lot of those things fall into the idea of a non-human intelligence, which
Right.
which is just it's something that is not coming from a person.
I think of demons and tricksters as kind of being two different trades within that whole realm.
That's a good way of putting it.
Uh,
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I know reading African folk tales, there's the whole concept of trickster gods
Right.
comes up
Yeah.
again and again.
Hmm.
Um, I think Scandinavian, here they come again. I think they have kind of that sort of tradition as well. I've never heard of a doppelganger that wasn't that couldn't be lumped into that category of
You
demon or
probably could.
trickster.
Yeah. Well, I think the only
I mean,
time,
what else is it?
right. Yeah, no, I think you make a good point there because a lot of times, and I think that's why those stories freak me out so much because a
Yeah,
lot of times it's not like there is a, I mean, maybe there are some stories out there of like good doppelgangers, like where it's, but that probably falls into the side of like guardian angels, like warning people or
sure.
something. That's so, which again, that puts it back onto that spectrum. So that's actually, I think that's a point in your cat camp there. So,
I'll put I'll adjust the score accordingly.
okay. um,
But I know like some of the other things like this it can even appear in the form of just something that's vocalized.
totally. Yep. People hear
And
it.
I
Yep.
think we heard there was an inn we talked about many years ago with our friend Mike, and I think he talked about I think it was his mom
Hmm.
heard the voice of her sister.
Oh yeah, I believe so. We'll have to check with
It
him
was
on that.
something like that. I'm sure
Yeah.
Mike will listen and will fill us in. Mike, if you're listening in the future, which is also right now for you, isn't that weird? Definitely reach out to us and let us know. But that was just strictly an auditory
Hmm.
experience, and I think
Yeah.
that's pretty freaky too.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Um, so one of the other big ones we talk about a lot on here, which are honestly probably one of my favorite categories, is just the idea of ghost lights. Talk about ghost lights a lot. These incorporate everything that we talk about with will-o-wisps, which kind of have a folkloric and again Scandinavian origin. Ghost lights can have things to do with haunted, train lanterns and things like that. But it all kind of like boils down to ghost lights are light phenomena that appear to be moving intelligently, I would say.
Yeah, lanterns definitely fall into that. I want to
Hmm.
know though. We have heard in our neck of the woods, and therefore I'm sure in other places too, about glowing eyes. Would you
Yes.
put that into the ghost light category?
I would probably put it in ghost like category unless there was like a form along with the eyes, or if they looked like because I guess when I that's a good point. I guess when I hear like glowing red eye stories, I typically imagine it as like two red glowing orbs, which I think would fall as like ghost lights, not like their physical eyes, like with like a pupil and stuff.
Yeah, I've always interpreted it as like a gleam of eyes that you
Yeah.
see, and they seem to move around, but you never really detect much or any of anything else. It's not like you're getting on Nathaniel Green and seeing the whites of them or something, you know.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Correct. Yeah. So which is different because otherwise then it would just be an apparition, right?
Sure.
If you were just seeing parts of a
And
face.
what's really significant here is the luminescence of it
Yes.
in each of these occasions. While I think Will of the Wisp is something different, yet I think it would be a subset of some sort of paranormal glow,
Right. Yeah.
you know.
No, and that's why I use the idea of intelligent, appear to move intelligently, because that's what separates will-o-wisps in my mind from like commonly, well, I say commonly, but rare but naturally existing phenomena, kind of like Foxfire or St. Elmo's fire, or we have Earth lights, which are
Right.
electromagnetic discharges, that are very cool but not paranormal. But no one would interpret those
Yes,
as
and I'm glad you
moving
bring
intelligently. Yeah.
I'm glad you draw a distinction there. I remember reading Dracula, and as I
Hmm.
recall correctly, when um oh my gosh, what is his name? Jonathan Carver? Is that the
Something like
main
that. Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
who visit? He's
Yeah.
the real estate agent.
Yeah.
Either way, the real estate agent
Keanu
that
Reeves.
goes
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves. Thank you. That was going to bother me if I couldn't remember Bram Stoker's
Yeah.
famous character Keanu Reeves, who thankfully is. Anyway, by the way, I did always like that early '90s Dracula because when they're back in I guess that would be the early Renaissance,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know. When they show him as the king and he's wearing like a suit of armor that
Yeah.
at one point looks tough and demonic, but also looks like he's wearing a meat suit.
Yeah, it's a meat suit. Yeah.
It's a meat suit.
It's a real interesting art direction.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like it kind of looks like a beetle carapace too, because you're like,
It
that looks like
does.
it's hard.
Right.
Um, anyway, there was something. Oh, yeah. Now I know what I'm talking about. When I was reading the book and the real estate agent from London is heading. He's in a carriage. He's gotten off gotten off, and the carriage is really moving along. Every once in a while, the driver will stop because he'll see like a blue glowing flame along
Yep.
the roadside, and he'll
Yeah.
try to mark it. And again, this is again something I'm remembering from having read like 30 years back, and he's marking it. And when he's asked why he's marking it, our real estate agent is told or later learns that on certain nights those tongues of flame appear and they mark where treasure or valuables could be
Yep.
found if
Hmm.
one were to dig.
Yep.
Is that's ringing a
No, that
memory
is that
bell
is
for
a
you?
piece of independently standing folklore. Yep. Yep.
Okay, so when I think of Will o' the Wisp, that has always been where my mind goes.
Hmm. No, that's fair. Yeah. 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 Well, it was for I just love ghost lights in general. I just think they're
Yeah, it's
everything about them is
fascinating, but
cool.
I wouldn't put that as intelligent though.
Well, in what you're talking about, yeah, I agree. I
Okay.
think I think that element of will-o-wisp. I guess when I think of will-o-wisp specifically, I think of little glowing orbs, not so much the things like Foxfire. But again, I think that's a semantics thing on my part, probably. But
Okay.
I would agree with you on that. So speaking of like types of phenomena, we've used that word a lot tonight. When we say phenomena, we mean a whole list of things that do not have obvious uh, physical origins. One of the big ones is the idea of knocking. We talk about knocking a lot when we talk about ghosts. This comes up a lot in poltergeists, but it also comes up in intelligent hauntings as well. I would say not as much in residual hauntings. You don't seem to get just like random knockings with residuals, but I'm sure it does happen. But when we say knocking, this is different than the idea of like an EVP, which we'll get into later, or a disembodied voice. Knocking is just that's all it is. It's something. But I feel like a lot of times it's attributed to intelligent hauntings. Would you agree with that, or do you think it's kind of both, or either
I
or?
always, when I hear the term knocking, all I can think of is the Fox sisters and
Yeah,
all the seances and everything. So I would attribute it more towards charlatans.
and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
You're right.
yeah. I guess like I interpret it with like when people talk about, I think of it more as like a poltergeisty type thing. Like it seems like it's intelligent, but usually probably isn't.
I suppose so, but it seems like I can't, and now I can't say this definitively, but I don't think that whole concept of knocking to communicate
Hmm.
was in the folklore prior
Oh,
to
really? Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about
the
that.
rise of the spiritualist movement. I may be wrong.
We'll have to
I
look
may
that
be
up.
wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
we
No,
definitely
that's a good
hear
point.
footsteps, we hear
Hmm.
chains, we hear,
Right.
but like as a form, especially as a form of communication.
Hmm. No,
And
that's.
all the other sounds we talk about are
Hmm.
common, like people sounds. We don't normally, people aren't normally walking around
Knocking on stuff. Yeah.
unless it's a door. You don't
Right.
get
That's
up and do you
true.
get up in the middle of the night to like go get a glass of water and go like just for fun? No.
No.
It's knocking's
Yeah.
always used in my mind. And
As a as
again, I'm
a
sure I'm
form of
missing some things here.
communication. Yeah.
Exactly. Can
That
you
is a
tell?
good point.
Are you here with us? Knock. Knock twice if you're here with us,
Yeah.
Jeremy.
I wonder if that. Yeah. We're gonna have to do a little looking into that. I wonder if that was prominent prior to the Spiritist movement, or if that's something that they like co-opted. That's a good question.
I know. I know in our last episode with our friend Chris, we talked about radio a lot, and we
Hmm.
talked about like the spirit boxes, and that's kind of the tech today.
Hmm.
Knocking is just kind of the very low tech form, but it was a technology
Hmm.
that was utilized by spiritualists. And again,
Right.
they were doing that and also employing their skill of being able to produce raps and knocks and
Hmm.
project them in
And
ways that would fool people. So I interpret knocks as being a tool utilized by
mhm.
unreputable spiritualists,
Yeah. No, yeah, I
disreputable spiritualists.
disreputable. Yeah, not all spiritualists, but just disreputable ones. I think that like for me, I associate it more with the poltergeisty activity, but I do see where you're talking about with the communicative element. So,
Yeah.
and
And
whenever I
again, because I'm making a firm stance on this side of the table that poltergeist activity has nothing to do with spirits, just
right,
the
right.
spirited young person generally.
Right.
Um, yeah, I reject that.
So, yeah, so along with that though, we have the idea of disembodied voices. So, a disembodied voice I have as represents an audible sound of a voice. Sometimes this can show up on recordings, but it can also not. Um, Basically, disembodied voice is just you hearing a voice coming from seemingly nowhere as a type of phenomenon. And that, like I said, when we talked about with not poltergeist, doppelgangers, that would be the type of phenomena from a type of entity, you know. Um, but that's one you do hear. We do talk about quite a lot. With a disembodied voice, we just mean a voice that doesn't have an obvious source. And typically, whenever you're trying to disprove something, or not debunk, but kind of like I guess like debunk a claim kind of thing. If you have voices, you try and figure out, okay, did that come from outside the house? Did it come from a radio? Did it come from something else? Um, Along the same lines,
Yeah.
we mentioned footsteps earlier, which is still one of the things that freaks me out the most because of just my personal experiences hearing footsteps. But but when you say footsteps, that's literally what we mean, is hearing footsteps. So that's a type of auditory phenomena that, again, like we mentioned earlier, if they're not physical entities, how are they making noise? Or is the noise a different type of
Right.
phenomena separate from the entity? Who knows? But those do come up a lot as well.
Right. I know this is off topic slightly, but I was thinking about my statements about spiritualists and the knocking and everything.
Hmm.
And I was thinking because you went to disembodied voices from that, and I thought about ventriloquism. And
Oh
then I
yeah.
was reminded of what I think is like the goofiest ventriloquist act ever. Um, Ventriloquism doesn't really translate well onto record, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's an old 78.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
swear to
Yeah.
God. You
I
look it
believe
up.
it. Yeah.
Buddy Boy Hawkins, Walter Hawkins had a tune. It was a version of Hesitation Blues. Must I
Okay.
hesitate? Can I get you now?
Hmm.
Um, or rather, the 78, I think it was a Paramount record. They labeled it as voice throwing blues. And
That's
he
wild. That's interesting.
talks, sings the verses, but he uses ventriloquy for the chorus.
Okay. Like,
And it doesn't translate really well.
right.
But so I think they went with that title as opposed to another version of Hesitation Blues. So like the reason he sounds like he's singing while pinching his nose is because he's actually projecting his voice over here.
That's
It's
wild.
a it's a you'll have to look it up. It's as goofy to me as the infamous Laughing record,
Which is, yeah,
which
which is a
is also
classic.
awesome.
Yeah.
Like it does the job. It gets people to
Yeah.
laugh. It's wonderful. It's great to throw on at parties. So I'm sorry.
No, you're all
I
good.
had to go down because I just thought, oh, that's goofy.
So a few other things I want to just kind of get to for phenomena for tonight. So one of the things that we talked about earlier was ghost lights, and ghost lights I think are typically separated from orbs. So orbs, when you hear people talk about them, are referring to bits of light that show up on camera. I kind of equivalent to the idea of like an EVP, but for film. Orbs, I think, are most commonly associated with them showing up after and people not seeing them at the time. Because I think if someone sees something in the room, takes a picture, and it's on the picture, to me, that's a ghost light. It's only an orb if it's not seen while you're taking, like, does that make sense? Does that track?
Um, Say that again. Say that
So
again. Let me think about this.
this is more like situation, like if you're in a room and you see a light in the room,
Yes.
and then you take a picture of that light and it's on the camera, I would say you got a photo of a ghost light. I would only,
Okay.
I mean, this is where I might be different than other people. I only use the term orb to reference lights that show up on camera but are not seen visually.
I will strike out with another decisive decision,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna say that if you believe in orbs, then you should be able to see them because any claimed orb that I've ever seen photographed is either dust or smoke exhalation,
Hmm.
you know, and
So,
pretty self-evidently so. Sometimes an insect,
mhm.
but yeah, my thinking is if orbs are a real thing, and I don't believe they are, but if they are, they would fall under the umbrella of Ghostlight.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I think that like the reason I draw a distinction of, or not draw a distinction, but draw a comparison to an EVP is like if you're, we'll actually get into EVPs in the next episode on ghost hunting, but it's the idea of capturing something accidentally or on a medium versus experiencing something in the room with you. Um,
Hmm. I say this. I'm not disagreeing with you that a lot of times these things are caught um, listening to recordings after the fact. You
mhm.
can't say it's accidental because someone put that recorder up for this very purpose.
Accidental's not
Yep.
not the best term for
Yeah,
it. I agree. Yeah.
but well, I'll come back to that in a
Because
second.
yeah,
But at the same
yeah.
time, we have known because of all these shows where people think
Hmm.
they hear something, and sometimes the camera hears it as well,
Right.
and then they go back and listen and they hear something that sounds vaguely human. There's only one time that I know of very distinctly where we
Hmm.
can say they did not and they weren't trying to get this,
Hmm.
and that was our friends, and we were talking about them before we started recording because I'm hopefully going to be seeing them next week.
Hmm.
when one of their parents
Yes.
recorded, they were recording birds,
Hmm.
and that was one of the truly
Right.
bizarre instances of EVP.
Of an EVP.
And
Yes.
it's that way because again, the story, and two, I have full confidence in the statements made by the people that presented
In the
that audio
provenance.
to us. There were no shenanigans going on. It was very much just this is extremely weird, and it
Hmm.
is in no way what they were seeking.
Hmm. Right, absolutely. Yeah, so I think that, yeah, and we'll get into the idea of disembodied voices versus EVPs in the ghost hunting episode because we've been at it for a while now, and I'm not even halfway through. So we're gonna make ghost hunting its own paranormal
Right.
dictionary episode. So in addition to UFOs, Bigfoot, and high strangeness. So there's even a few other things we didn't get to on here. But we'll save that for next episode that we'll do in the future sometime. But really hope that you all enjoyed us talking like about things in this kind of way. It's definitely different from us relaying stories like we normally do. But I hope that this actually both spurs some questioning with people. Like, if you use the term poltergeist, like, what do you really mean? If you use the term ghost light, what do you really mean? And if you disagree with us, please let us know because again, this is not we're not authorities or anything. And I think that through trying to define these really sometimes amorphous, hard to pin down terms, we end up learning more about what we're trying to explain by going through that exercise. So, so if you have thoughts, you can reach out to us on YouTube or Instagram, or you can simply send us an email at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com.